All right, folks. Look, my name is Dr. William Irvin, and I am an educational support manager and director of the Hbcu Collective with conn-selmer Division of Education. And I am so excited to have you with us this evening, alongside my colleague and friend, Dr. O'Neill Sanford, who is our educational support consultant and retired HBCU director of bands. I'm here. We have a great night in store for you. But before we get started with all the meat and potatoes of preserving jazz in our HBCU institutions, I would love to invite my close friend and colleague, Dr. Tim Lawson-Heiser, the Vice President of Education for conn-selmer, to come on in and welcome you all to conn-selmer. Tim, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, Dr. Irvin. Thanks for that nice introduction. And to all of you, congratulations. You're already have made yourself winners just by showing up. Anybody that's going to take an hour out of their schedule at this time of year and after being Zoomed to death, it's already obvious that you're the kind of people that make the huge difference. And, when we talk about one person making a difference, proof, right? You are proof. As you well know, conn-selmer is the sponsor for the HBCU National Band Directors Consortium. We're partners with you in so many different ways, and we're excited about this newest community. On behalf of all of conn-selmer, certainly the Division of Education, our managing director, who's a great guy, Mike Campheis, and our CEO and president, who, you can't say enough nice things about Steve Zaff. When the pandemic hit and everybody started retrenching, the Division of Education was spared. In fact, if anything, he emphasized it. He doubled down on it. And as a result, we have a very robust, that's a nice word, isn't it? We got a very robust opportunities for all of you. And this is only the beginning. The drawing board is full. So we're really jazzed, no pun intended, about having everybody here. And I want to remind you that on June 14 to 17 is conn-selmer Institute Connect. So we'll count on seeing you there. It's stuffed with headliners, including Tia. She's going to be there too. So plan on being there. Put that on your calendars. And I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder, but just special thanks to Dr. Sanford and to Dr. Irvin. Grab a pencil and paper, notepad, notebook, whatever you've got. There's going to be a ton of information coming. If there's anything we can do for you, the Division of Education, you let us know. If there's ever a time we need to lock arms and have a wall of solidarity in this profession, it's right now, so we can take care of our kids. So with that, Dr. Irvin, let the music begin. It's all yours.
Absolutely, Dr. Tim. Thank you for dropping in and sharing with us and just letting us know that conn-selmer is going to be with the HBCU community all the way through and through. And right now, we want to just quickly introduce everybody on our panel. And Dr. Sanford, I want to let you take it away and possibly go ahead and introduce Ms. Roxanne Stevenson.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening to everyone. And welcome to, as William said, our first HBCU collective webinar. We're excited about getting started with this, and we have many other events that we will be doing down the road in the very near future. Tonight I'm going to be short, and but I have the distinct pleasure to introduce to you a person that I've known for about 18 years. We've worked together about 15 years. Specifically, she has been the director, coordinator, make it happen person for our HBCU National Band Directors Consortium. She's been the director, and she's made our all-star jazz ensemble work for us, regardless of the odds and all the things that we've had to go through to make it happen. We've been very successful with that. She is a music educator, strong musician, very demanding from her students and her colleagues too. And we've had a lot of fun working together. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you my friend and colleague, Miss Roxanne Stevenson. Hello.
Thank you so much for being here, Roxanne. It's so good to see you. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce the other two panelists tonight. First up as well will be Professor Robert Griffin at Florida A&M University, who is spearheading the jazz program down there. Robert, it's good to see you. Wave at everybody because we're getting ready to get started. All right. How you doing? And last but certainly not least, our headliner coming up for conn-selmer Institute Connect, the premier artist, the sound behind the Soul movie, the sound behind Dorothea Williams playing the saxophone in the movie Soul, and a good AU Center friend of mine, Miss Tia Fuller. It's good to see you tonight. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I am doing well.
Thanks for having me tonight.
Oh, I'm excited about it. And hopefully tonight you can give us a little sneak peek about what you're going to talk about or even play coming up later in June. So, hey, we'll get to that a little later. But right now, I just want to ask a huge question just to break the ice. It's very simple, though. I'll start with you, Tia. And I know you're shedding a lot, you're practicing a lot. And I just want to know, who are you listening to right now? Because jazz artists, we always listen to somebody while we practice. Who are you listening to right now?
Oh, wow. So ironically enough, it's not jazz.
That's all right.
It's and it's a vocalist, actually. It's a new artist out. Her name's, I think I'm pronouncing her name right, Nao. It's Nao. She's kind of like an underground artist, but I've just been checking her out because of the different textures that she's able to create with her voice.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's new on the horizon for me.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Professor Griffin, who are you listening to right now?
Well, I'm as a trombone player, I always go back, to the source. So I'm still listening to JJ and of course Curtis Fuller. And a lot of young guys are doing some great things, with the trombone now. I mean, Michael Deese is doing some good stuff. And, of course you go back to Frank Rosalino and those guys. But, I don't always listen to trombone players, maybe I'm listening to Milk Jackson, or, listening to some Stanley Tarantine. I'm kind of a purist when it comes to going right to the source, of jazz. So, and then of course in the keyboard area, Herbie Hancock, So.
Oh yeah, you can't go wrong to listen to Herbie Hancock.
Man.
All right, Roxanne.
Robert, don't forget about Slide.
Slide Hampton. That's
right. You got to listen to Slide. That's right.
I'm a trombone player also, and I always zeroed in on Slide.
There you go.
Yes, sir.
Good man.
Yes. Good man.
Roxanne, who are you listening to?
I had to laugh when Tia said that she wasn't really listening to saxophone players, because I listen to a lot of singers and probably people that are not on your radar. I listen to Vanessa Bell. I used to listen to Danny Bell a lot. The Clark sisters, a lot of gospel music, Yolanda Adams. And then I listen to I call them the unsung people. I like listening to Al Jarreau, and I don't sing, mind you. And Grover Washington, I really like Grover Washington and James Moody. And I really discovered that because there's this album out called Moody's 70th birthday. Mm-hmm. And I think I just bought it because somebody said something about James Moody. I bought that album. And Grover Washington and Moody are playing this. It might as well be spring, and it's a battle, but it's just a weird battle. But it was great, and I just like the fact that people like Grover and the rest of them, they played a different way, and people still liked it. So they are the ones that I think I enjoy listening to.
I had a good opportunity to play with James Moody with the Clark Atlanta University Jazz Orchestra when I was in school, and Moody's Move for Love is one of my favorites even to this day. If I could just open up the question to Tia, if you can just open up with the first question, why is listening to artists, even as a performer and an educator, so important in the field of jazz, in the genre of jazz? Why is that important?
Well, in that I have listened quite a bit in my life, and coming from a musical family, I kind of grew up. I didn't kind of, but I kind of grew up with just being immersed in the jazz, and so I would say it's extremely important because it's like learning a different language. We're really trying to perfect. Well, not even perfect, but really become acquainted with the different nuances of the language.
Yeah.
And listening, I have a whole 3-step process. I'm sorry, my puppy is acting up.
That's
But
all
if you
right.
hear scratching, it's him. But I have a whole 3-step process of the different tiers and different levels of listening and internalizing, and it's conscious, subconscious, and superconscious. And
Whoa.
so being able and being aware, on a conscious level, to listening to where, okay, we're consciously taking in this information, we're closing up, or we're turning off our lights, we're closing our doors, where we're really being intentional about what we're listening about. And then, moving to the subconscious and really tapping into the repository of what we have. It's almost like brushing your teeth. And when we first pick up a toothbrush, consciously we're thinking about putting the toothpaste on the toothbrush because our parents like go back and forth, in your mouth. And then
Right.
subconsciously we just pick up the toothbrush and it's like boom, boom, boom. We access the repository of what we have been doing or who we've been listening to. And then the third step to me is the super consciousness of really being able to tap into the spirit of in the case of listening, the spirit of an artist, like really playing from the heart and tapping into phrasing, articulation. But to me, listening and essentially transcribing, that's like my 3-step process for transcribing, is not just being able to sing it, but it's really being able to experience it holistically. Yes. So that we're able to reproduce elements like the minutia of the elements of the music. So listening is crucial. And even when I'm not able to pick up my horn, like I'll listen, and of course practicing mentally, but really feeling the essence and the spirit of as to what you're listening to,
Absolutely. Coming through an HBCU jazz program, that was something that was very important to everybody in the organization. And I'm sure Professor Stevenson and Griffin, you all do the same thing at your institutions. How are you, Robert, how are you able to get your students to buy into the importance of listening and transcribing and internalizing, and then basically replaying that or re-singing those phrases, those nuances? How do you get your students to buy in?
Right. That's a great question. Well, to kind of tie into what Tia said earlier about, it's a language, it's a vocabulary. When you think about us as human beings and how we learn the English language, we learn by imitating the sounds that our parents teach us, right? And then as, we learn our syllables, we learn your consonants, your vowels, you put them together, you make sounds, and then you start to imitate what you hear. So jazz, by and large, is the same thing. It's a vocabulary. We want to imitate the sounds. We want to be able to generate the nuances, the bends, the scoops, the phrasing, the tone quality. I try to encourage the students to actually get inside the sound of that person. When we do Ellington, I have the guys study, about the person, learn something about the person that played your part. Right. And it's all about learning the vocabulary and being able to create the essence of what that artist is actually doing, when they're improvising. And, to get them to buy into it we listen and it's like, well, what did you hear? How did that make you feel? Did you hear that? Man, what did he just do? Right. Check that out.
Right.
And I try to get them to learn, licks, play along with recordings, get what you can. Maybe you can't get all of it, get what you can, figure it out, transpose it to all 12. Now you've got kind of a basis, you've got somewhere to start from. Improvisation, is, for me, it's about a starting point. You got to have a point of departure in your solo. So developing your vocabulary comes from small bits and pieces that you can learn and develop. And the more that you study and imitate and copy, and it helps your vocabulary to grow.
And when you speak of vocabulary, and I'm going to go to Roxanne while Dr. Sanford gets his questions ready for you all. Roxanne, we're talking about the vocabulary that we pull from in jazz. And I know My teacher, Professor James Patterson at Clark Atlanta University, always talked about the syllables that we would use while playing certain styles of jazz, whether it would be bebop, whether it be swing. Talk to us about how you teach your students, especially when they first come into your program at Chicago State University, how you get them to play the language of jazz.
Well, first, I was listening to everybody talking about listening to music, and I remember growing up, and they would tell us to listen, and I would say, "Listen to what?" And they said, and when you don't know if it's good, even I didn't know that Charlie Parker was great, So how do you know what to listen to, and how do you listen, and what did that mean? And so it was interesting to hear them the two of them talk about just trying to break that down. And when I was coming up, they weren't really breaking it down. It was, oh, just listen. And it just kind of left you out there floundering. So, but I was teaching an African-American history of music class, and the student asked it was a young white lady, and she asked, how do they learn to sing gospel like that? And to know that there are no classes for it. And I played a recording of Kiera Sheard and Karen Clark Sheard.
Yeah.
And Kiera was imitating Karen all the way down to the end, as she put in some extra lines. And when I played that, then it broke something in my own thought process, is that, I'm pretty much saying the same thing, but at least I'm showing them, this is the vocabulary. Like you said, you break it up. This is what he did. Why do you think he did that right there? He's playing his blues. Why is Charlie Parker playing this line? So my first experience with Charlie Parker was not from Charlie Parker. It was from a young guy, Bill Dickens. I had just started playing in high school, and he was a bass player, and he was already gigging, and he played a transcribed Charlie Parker solo on bass. And I was thinking, what is that, right? So when he did that, then what did I do? I went and bought the book. I didn't even know there was an Omni book. I went and bought the Omni book, and I was fascinated with just the music. So then you start trying to break the language down and get students to imitate, get them to listen. I have a young man right now who's a great player. He doesn't play any jazz at all. And I said, hey, look, I would find something easier. I didn't give him Charlie Parker. I gave him someone else. Just learn this part. Just play the melody for me the same way he did it, exactly the way he did it. And come back with your regular lesson. Now, this is not a jazz lesson. This is regular applied saxophone. So after your lesson, play that melody. Then it's, now, I want you to learn the first stanza of his solo, exactly the way he did it.
Right.
Because they want to put their extra notes in there yet, but they don't know what extra notes to put in there yet. So use this, and then they start to build a language. And we talk about, yes, there is a rote learning, but as African Americans, we've always done rote learning. But when Suzuki did rote learning, they said it was a great method, so it's a method that they use in other countries. A lot of violinists, all of them learn to play through Suzuki's method. And so we're using that same imitation method. So hopefully I answered your question, and that we bring them the language. We give it to them a bit at a time.
Right.
Like throwing the whole book. We're giving it to them a bit at a time.
You can't eat a whole apple with one bite. You got to take little bites, because you'll choke if you don't. You got to give it to them a little bit at a time and build that oral sense of listening to what's going on in our historical music. Dr. Sanford, you got a question for the crew?
Yes. Several things that I'd like to talk about. I'm hearing them speak about what inspired them and when they got started in jazz. And I was just sitting here thinking, in terms of myself, I grew up, of course, in Louisiana in the South and out in the country. And I was 10 years old before I had even seen a trombone, because we no instruments. I hadn't seen one. But the one thing that I had was that my mom hated the country. And she would take all five of us down to New Orleans to spend some time. And I got the opportunity to go to the Louis Armstrong Park and hear the guys player. I'm the only boy and I have four sisters. So I wanted to be away from them. So she'd drop me off at the Louis Armstrong Park. And that was my first experience with experiencing jazz. Now the thing is that I learned by listening to what I heard there. James Brown, all the trombone player, Robert, we all learned the licks the James Brown trombone player made. And then finally I got around to playing with a mature band. And I walked off the stage one night with the saxophone player, and he told me to go study your harmony. Go study harmony. So my question to the three of you, how do you, and when do you introduce the students to harmony, and what methods you use to get them going with that and have them to understand what they're doing instead of just using their ears? Can somebody speak on that?
Are you talking about the Omni book?
Harmony.
Harmony. Okay. Thank you.
That's the Southern accent now.
No, that's okay.
So what stage do you teach them, and what do you teach them about harmony?
I see Robert is unmuted. Go ahead, Robert, take a stab at
it. That's an interesting question at this point. The building blocks for music is scales. We learn our scales and we learn our intervals and so forth, and arpeggios. So From that point, we start to build our chords by way of major and minor arpeggios, diminished, augmented, etc. And then we got to go to the piano. We've got to go to the piano and start dealing with chords, the related scales, modes, progressions, and then getting into 2/5s and so forth, right? But it's important to, when we're dealing with getting kids introduced to jazz and getting them started, you don't want to give them too much because they'll get overwhelmed. You want to give them something that they can do, and something that they're successful, and something that sounds good, and something that's motivating and inspiring, right? But so, all of the work that we do in the Arbin's books, and Melodious Etudes and all those studies, we transfer that information over into the jazz area. So we start to think about how chords relate, how the scales relate to the chords, how the arpeggios relate. And then from that point, in dealing with arpeggios and improvisation, I'd have a student maybe just improvise. Okay, so we're going to improvise on this progression right now, and you just, whatever note you hear, play it. Just play that note. And so now I have them sort of figure out, okay, so where are you thinking? What are you, what mode are you hearing on? Did that note work? No, it didn't work. Why did that note not work? Okay, so let's talk about this harmony, this structure that we're in. So really for me, it begins with scales, arpeggios, modes, and going to the piano.
Yeah. The piano is key. It's key. I am the university I went to, my undergraduate school. We were not even allowed to play jazz in the building. That couldn't happen, during my time there. So we had to kind of go over to the dormitory that had a piano in it, and do our little jazz bit. And of course, we'd sometimes see our professors, in the juke joints and the clubs that we were playing in. So the one thing that I've experienced is that a lot of kids come to us, and I've had students to ask me, what is jazz? They had not been exposed to jazz. So how many universities are you aware of that have jazz education studies in their programs? Roxanne, do you have an idea? HBCU schools with jazz study programs as part of the curriculum?
So we did a little search earlier with the AAJC, African American Jazz Caucus, just trying to find out who has what. And so that is a work in progress right now, just trying to get to who all actually have full programs. So most schools will have at least a jazz band or a combo. And then some schools may provide applied improv classes, or maybe a jazz history class. And then schools like ours that do music education may have jazz methods courses, but many of our schools do not have full-blown jazz programs. So I know Florida A&M is one, and Jackson State has always had a full program, North Carolina Central, and some other schools. But it's not the way it should be. Jazz is not in our school system the way it should be. No.
Right. Yeah, there are some high schools, several high schools out there that some serious jazz programs, and I'm stunned to find out just what you experienced. Even some of our HBCU schools that's been around for quite a few years still don't have it, and of course a lot of times it's what finance. Some of them would love to have it and don't have the funds to do that.
Dr. Sanford, I want to quickly touch on two questions that came up in the chat. And Tia, I want to hit you with with the first one here, and it goes back to when Robert was talking about harmonies. We had Gregory Bledsoe who asked the question: do you at all prioritize the pentatonic scale when you're teaching harmonies and when you're teaching the style of jazz or the beginning of jazz to your students?
This is a great question, because I'm really having to dig back, because teaching at Berklee College of Music, I'm teaching a lot of the advanced students who already have themselves housed for the most part. But when I was teaching just introductory or jazz to introductory students, I would focus on certain elements of the pentatonic scale. For me, harmony is an extension of color and of life. And not to be so esoteric, but one of the things that is really important for me in the classroom is this whole adage of music is a manifestation of life, so that students understand the relevance. So many times, especially when I grew up, I was learning harmony and chords, but I wasn't able to internalize it fully after a while, because I didn't really understand how it was relevant to me. What was my association to it on a personal level? Like, what did it make me feel like playing a major scale or a dominant scale? So just trying to take harmony to the next level, and starting with the idea of, okay, this scale, whether it be pentatonic, dominant, what have you, what does that sound do to you? Like, what does it feel like when you play this? So that there's a connection to it, that the students establish within themselves, and then this association now intersects with certain things that they hear either on the radio, and they're able to make that association. But I guess just more of like my myopic way of looking at it. One of the first things I remember when I was teaching private lessons to younger students, one of the first things I did, I think Dr. Griffin, you had spoke about this, is really just getting to the sound, like allowing them to function from an abundance mindset, meaning that just play a chord on the piano or have them listen to So What, and really you might give them some gold tones or some notes for them to move around, but to really start from this idea of exploration and seeing how well their ear is functioning in correlation with whatever harmony or theory is given, so that they're able to, their ear is to serve as a directive, because essentially it's our ear, and it's also the conscious level of course, studying harmony and theory and that element, but it's really the balance. And I think too many times in education, in particular jazz education, the westernized way that we're teaching it here in America, is that it's so focused on harmony, it's so focused on theory, that we're again losing the spirit. So I think upon inception of introducing concepts to students, we have to start from where they are and what they're hearing, and many times that'll help to lead us to give them certain ideas, and starting from there. So yeah, I think just overall, starting from a place of them coming to the table and bringing their ideas with no sort of pretense, and then being able to structure that, say, oh, actually, that's a dominant chord or that's a minor chord, and then coming back to the essence of theory.
It's very interesting, and you're bringing it home. And I want to shift it just a little bit. And thank you, Dr. Georgia Bledsoe, for that question. I want to talk about the fact that we call this the HBCU Collective, and we're talking about preserving jazz in our HBCUs. And tonight we have a collection of various people who work with HBCUs or have been with HBCUs in the past. And Tia, you're a graduate of Spelman College, and you studied with Joe Jennings over there with the Spelman Jazz Ensemble. And Robert, you're over there at Florida A&M. I know you're an alum of Florida A&M as well. And even though you're at Chicago State University, Roxanne, you are one of the pillars of the HBCU consortium when it comes to the jazz programs, and you're a beast on your horn and everything already as well. I really want to take things back. And there's a question in the Q&A that I just really want you all to think about. And I'll start with Robert and we'll go around again. How can we ensure that jazz education will become a part of the HBCU curriculum, especially since jazz is rooted from the Black culture and experience? Think about that. How can we ensure that jazz education will become a part of the HBCU music curriculum, especially since jazz is rooted from the Black culture and experience? Who'd like to take a first stab at that?
I'd like to jump out real quick. I'm not going to take up too much time because I know this is such a lofty topic, and it's so important.
Yeah, we're going to only scratch the surface tonight.
I know we're only going to, yeah, really, it's tip of the iceberg tonight. But as Roxanne mentioned earlier, we were talking about, only certain schools have programs. There's an organization that I'm actually a part of called the HBCU Jazz Education Initiative. Okay, and that organization, the mission of that organization is to spread and to help HBCUs that do not have jazz programs take the necessary steps to be able to get a jazz program started or a jazz band started, jazz courses added to the curriculum. The statistics that, we're talking about on that is that, there are more than 100 HBCUs in the country, and right now less than 10 have jazz degrees, right? And so we're looking at Central, Howard, FAMU, Virginia State, and Jackson State, and a couple of others, right now. So how can we ensure that? It's going to take a concerted effort of lobbying on the part of all of us involved in jazz to try to help our brothers and sisters at the HBCUs do what's needed to do to get the jazz program started in their schools. And one of the things that we're doing at the HBCU JEI is reaching out to the administrators at universities with an effort to demonstrate the importance of jazz, not only as a music, but as an art form and as a cultural icon to the HBCU experience. It's greatly important that we do that. So there's an ongoing effort right now through the organization I'm involved with to try to make this happen through an outreach to the various universities. And the thing of it is that one of the difficulties, and somebody mentioned in the chat too, we're talking about high school programs and so forth with jazz bands. How do we get it going in preparation for college? If there's no jazz bands in college, where do the kids go? Where do the high school kids go? So Roxanne.
Okay. All right. I always thought we should take a page out of the playbook for the PE departments around the world. If you all remember, some years ago, the PE department decided they decided in America that all kids needed to have gym 4 years in high school. I don't know if you remember reading through that in your history classes, but they have made their own fan club by giving access to all of these sports to everybody. So if you find somebody, they usually watch the sports they played. So if you grew up playing football or basketball, that's usually the sport you watch on television. If you played baseball, you usually watch baseball. So I think we have to do, in order to really secure jazz, even on the collegiate level, we need to make sure that kids are getting jazz early. Make sure there's access to jazz for all students growing up, just like you have PE and everything else, so that students will begin to understand the importance of it. That's number one. Now, every school may not have a jazz program, because I thought about one of the questions we had about curriculum. And if you are a state university, say like ours, we're a state university that's state accredited, federally accredited, NASM accredited, there's so many rules with the accreditation process that it doesn't leave a lot of room for including jazz education outside of a jazz major. And I think that the jazz education should be included regardless of your concentration. So if you are going to be a music teacher, jazz is not in the curriculum. Now, we added jazz methods, so all of our students have to take jazz methods classes in order to graduate and to go out here to teach. So if your teachers that are finishing undergrad have no exposure to jazz, then they're not going to have it in their schools, and those kids will not come to college ready to play already, if that makes sense. So if you think about it, we have to start trying to include it in undergraduate levels, for even if it's not a major. And then you bring your jazz bands in. You get the jazz band, and then you can start adding the other classes that go with it. And even at our university, most of the classes are private. It's a good thing, and then not, but it's good because the students actually get to take applied improv, applied, jazz music history, all of that. Well, not jazz music history, but jazz theory. But those classes they get to take individually. So that's what I'd like to see happen, some revamping of the curriculum. And if we're even just learning our history and learning the theory of it, we're still teaching music theory the same way for the last 150 years in our universities. But we have 150 years more of music that has changed. So when do we let go some of the other stuff and add things? So we're having that conversation at my university, and the guy that's over theory, he's wondering at what point does he talk about a C7 flat 5 chord instead of only using figure bass, and putting that into the regular curriculum instead of students having to actually just have a jazz class, and that's the only way you can study jazz.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Roxanne. Go ahead, Doc.
I make a point. Yes, I'd like to go back to something Robert said earlier, as far as at our colleges and universities, HBCU colleges and universities, the directors and chair of the Department of Music got to be able to sell that program to their upper administration. You've got to go to the upper administration, because you're going to need proper additional faculty, because most of the faculty, majority of the faculty in our schools don't know anything about, not a whole lot about jazz. And certainly some of them don't know, even the persons who are teaching theory, basic fundamentals of theory, don't know anything about it. So you have to hire additional personnel for that. Then you need equipment and all of those things. So some kind of way that you're going to have to find a way to get to the upper administration, or a person that can get you to the upper administration to sell that in the university to your administration. And I've had success doing that. And I know some other people, who have also had success, but you've got to start right where it is. If the kid is at the university, you want to start jazz program at your university, you're going to have to sell it within the system. And then, of course, it has to go to the top in order to make it happen. So, yeah, strong point, Rob.
Excellent. We have two of the finest musicians in the world to answer this question on the webinar tonight. And you'll know who you are when I say this. How can we influence more young girls and women to be involved in jazz? Also, how can women in jazz be invited to the table to influence others to be involved in jazz? That comes from my good friend, Stephanie Sanders at Norfolk State University. Good to hear from you, Stephanie. Tia and Roxanne, knock it out the park.
Yeah. Well, I think just equity and inclusivity, like being more deliberate with, again, I think the big picture of, okay, what is the platform that we're presenting jazz in? And are we being intentional, like from jazz festivals to institutions? Are we being intentional with finding young women or older women, more experienced women to represent and say, hey, we're out here doing this, you can do this too on a subconscious level. This is a conversation, of course, that we've always had because we've always been a part of his story, but we've been underwritten. And although we've been very much a part of the fabric of this music. So I think just being more intentional as far as creating different programs, going into the high school systems, in schools, and looking for those young women and providing additional support such as scholarships to go to colleges. But this is something that I've talked with Terry Lynn Carrington about, because she has her Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice at Berkeley. It's like an umbrella of Berkeley, and basically she's talking about equity, and the slogan is jazz without patriarchy, stepping into this world and reassembling this mindset of a non-patriarchal music. And so, and one of the things that she speaks about is really creating this more equal playing ground. And because it has been historically so inequitable that we now, in order to come up and have more women present, we have to create more forums, more opportunities, more support to bring that element of young women or older women being presented on these larger platforms, so that people can see more of an equitable environment, so that the younger women can now say, oh man, that's something that I want to do. That would be, I see, because I know when I was younger, couple of ladies in Colorado, I remember seeing them, and just because I saw them up on stage, I was like, oh, I can do this too. Whereas prior to that, it was a little more challenging. Of course, it was more accessible because it was in my family, but just seeing someone who looks like you, who is another woman, it's like, okay, this, I want to do this, and I can do it. So that's one way. I mean, this is a lengthy conversation for sure, but
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Roxanne, you want to take a quick stab at it before we move on?
Right. Yeah, Tia and I always end up kind of answering those questions, and unfortunately, I hadn't seen anyone. Had never seen a female, but I didn't know it was something. I didn't see it because it didn't exist. I never thought it was an issue until grad school. No one brought it to my attention that I was in a place where I shouldn't be. Because my high school band director, he just taught all of us as if he thought all of us were going to be the greatest musicians ever. And so I really respect him for that. That was Harold Bray. And so what I would like to say is that when you get those young ladies into your programs, use their gift. Give them the opportunity to play. Sometimes we push them aside because we have a preconceived notion. If you have a guy who can really, really solo, and a young lady, she's really soloing pretty good too, but you think he's greater, so then you kind of minimize them. And did you do something to the psyche of a person? Mm-hmm. And even at your older age, people can really mess with you psychologically by minimizing your contribution, basically. So, Tia, as great a saxophone player as she is, if you had to keep going into a room every day and they select everybody over you all the time, it eventually it kind of, you will either quit or you will find your own ball and play your own game. So for me, I thought in order to have what I wanted, I just got my own ball. So I try to encourage young ladies. I got my own ball. I have my own band. We play the music I like the way I like it. Started my own jazz band, community jazz band, and So because there are some musicians around the city, I love to hear them play. So my favorite saxophone player, I get to hear him at every rehearsal, Tyrone Hines, because, you know, if he plays something really great, I'll stop the band and say, take it back, let her be. And, you know, they didn't do anything wrong. I just want to hear him take another you know,
Well,
and I'm stealing in my head.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
typing stuff that he's playing. Like, man, how can
Because
I
you're listening.
what I'm doing? Right. But the thing is that you have to encourage. I wrote an article. It's called "From Novel to Normal." We're not going to see more girls until we see more girls. Not going to see more women until you see more women. You know, you don't want to. We shouldn't always be the only one in the room. You know, so if you provide the right instruments, number one, that was the starting point. Stop giving them what they call the girl instruments, and you can't gig on this flute, clarinet, oboe, whatever. You know, so you might make sure they get to play saxophone and trumpet and trombone, and that'll give them the opportunity to play in jazz bands and places beyond that, and make a conscious effort to include the girls.
Absolutely. And Roxanne, I've known you for 20 years and you're great at it. And Tia, you know, we've just crossed paths recently, and I tell you, you're awesome. And I just want to talk real quick and go back real quick, Dr. Sanford, to a couple of questions that Dr. Tamisha Brock put in regards to how to get the kids started to go to HBCUs to play in jazz programs or study jazz. And are there some things that high school students need to know before they go to the HBCUs or any college or university for that matter, to be prepared to audition to be in a jazz studies program? I know, Tia, you're at Berkeley, Roxanne, you're at Chicago State University, and Robert, you're at Florida A&M University. So put on your professor hats now and see what you would suggest to high school band directors to offer their students to be prepared to come to your universities. Robert?
Well, the audition process for jazz is very similar to, you know, just a standard audition process. The only difference is the repertoire is different, you know, but, you know, learning tune, you know, working on improv, sight reading, you know, is really, really important. And I've noticed, you know, this to high school band directors, I was a high school band director for 15 years. I know what it's like, man, with the time, you know, the time that you don't have, right? But one of the things that that we've noticed with students coming in, sight reading is always a part of the audition process, you know, and in the jazz world, in the big band world, you know, a lot of times your gig is going to be a sight reading gig. You know, you got to be able to read. And so that's really important. You know, being able to play in a variety of tunes, you know, learning some repertoire, learning some bebop tunes, some blues tunes, some standards, you know, some rhythm changes tunes, you know, bossa novas, you know, right? Be able to play the tunes, be able to blow on them, right? And sight reading. You know, that's really, really important. The sight reading often tells, you know, the difference between two people who are equally skilled. You know, the one that reads the best is going to be the one that gets, you know, the gig.
That's a good point there, Tia. I'm gonna take a quick turn real quick and change the question, and also from Dr. Brock. Should there be a difference in concepts that we teach when we're teaching combo versus big band? And I want you to dive into that a little bit, especially since you all have a lot of different types of music that you jump into at Berkeley. And you can kind of talk about that a little bit, as well as on all the ensembles that you all offer that are jazz, maybe jazz influence or hip hop or R&B influence as well, bringing all music into the curriculum.
Yeah. Well, I could start from there. I think that's really important, especially with all of the genres that are popular. I mean, that have always been popular, but a lot of students, sometimes some students go untapped, especially in HBCUs, because a certain genre is not offered. And at Berkeley, of course, I direct the Rihanna Ensemble, Beyonce Ensemble, Esperanza Ensemble, you know, Rainbow Big Band, which is a traditional big band, and then combos. And as far as your initial question, just should both be taught the same or differently? I think between combo and jazz band, I mean, any ensemble essentially we're working on we're working on essentially life skills, but we're also working on how to communicate as an ensemble. We're working on, of course, playing in tune, getting to the music, sight reading, and understanding that there are different hats depending on what ensemble you're in, that specifically everybody has a role to play in recognizing what role that is. So in particular, the lead trumpet player in the big band and the relationship between lead trumpet and drums and how they're really setting the standard for time, articulation, everything else. Whereas in a small group, that lead trumpet player might be setting that, but there's a little bit more versatility and that they could move in and out of. So I think essentially the principles behind the music are the same, whether it be a Rihanna ensemble, a horn section or a rhythm section playing specific parts with a click, but it's all of the nuances that you really have to zone in class to make sure that the students understand that their role might be different, even though the standard of excellence is still there, but their role specific to this music, really honoring whatever genre you're playing, is key in understanding what that is.
Thank you so much, Tia. And Dr. Sanford, as you get ready to queue up your next question, I'm going to answer Yolanda Douglas's question. You definitely tap into conn-selmer Institute Connect if you want to learn more things about jazz pedagogy, what we as directors can do to influence our students and prepare our students to be ready for jazz programs in college level. There will be some things offered this summer that you can tap into some of our jazz educators that will be there. And always go to our robust list of clinicians at conn-selmer Division of Education through the conn-selmer Institute to see who you can partner with or be mentored by to make sure all you want to learn in jazz is there for you. Roxanne, real quick, how can we get more kids in the African American community excited to play traditional instruments?
You mean you want them to get back to playing horns and
get back to playing horns,
right?
especially coming out of this pandemic,
Well, you know what? See, we're in Chicago, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic here in that I didn't even get a chance. I had never seen a saxophone until 9th grade. I saw it on television and picked it. My mom said they came in sizes, so we took an encyclopedia and found one. So I think for them to see it, to see the instruments, and to be able to have a chance to play it. A lot of the students aren't playing those instruments because they're not there. I have an elementary school. I started a band program through the Chance the Rapper, whatever program that he put forth. And I can't find a teacher because my students, by the time they graduate, they're hired immediately. So a lot of times by the schools where they're student teaching. So I'm putting it out there. Those of you who have people who are graduating and looking for jobs, you want to come to Chicago, I have jobs and not enough students to go around. But to start, I brought in a bunch of instruments and took some little kids, 5th, 6th grade, and you would have thought that I had brought in iPads and laptops and everything. They were so excited just to see a horn. Kids are still excited about things that they can touch and learn to play, but you have to have somebody there to teach it, and that's what we do not have. We don't have people teaching at the elementary level because our schools are K through 8 to get students started. When we brought those instruments in, every day they asked me, when are we going to get the horns? You know how you have to wait on the grant money to come through and all that stuff. So every day they asked me about these horns. And the principal was so excited about it that she worked their schedule, the school schedule, around my job schedule. So I had early morning little kids. And they still today are trying to find when are we going to get back because they want to learn to play these instruments. Excellent. So to make the instruments available and to make a teacher, not a pull-out program. We have all of these people around Chicago starting their special programs. Now, Chance the Rapper is a program like that, but you have to hire a teacher too with them. So I can't stay in that position. They have to hire someone. But to have somebody that is committed to that school every day or regularly, so their kids are playing regularly. That's how you get them started. Just like baseball. They don't wait till
Absolutely.
they go to college. They started playing little league. So put the instruments in their hand, put a teacher there, and make a competent teacher, and get them started to learn to play.
Well, you're at the right place to put instruments in hands. So if you need anything, let us know at conn-selmer. We can make that happen. We can definitely make that happen. Use those ESSER funds, folks. Dr. Sanford, we're going to land this plane, but I want you to go ahead and ask the question so we can close out.
Yeah, those were some strong, very strong points, Roxanne, that you made. I agree 100%. How do you balance being a performing artist and a full-time educator?
Ooh, that's a good one.
And a wife and a husband.
And, yes.
A lot of prayer.
How do you and still look great, terrific.
Yeah, everybody on his vibrant and smiling.
Yeah.
So Tia, how do you do it?
First time meeting you, Robert. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah. Likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Yeah.
So tell me about it. I mean, what's the life like?
Well, I'll go real quick because mine is not, I'm not on the road a lot. I'm pretty much, on campus. But it actually works well because the chairman of our music department is Lindsay Sargent, who's a fabulous jazz pianist.
Right.
Of course, I'm sure if you ever heard the FAMU band, those are his arrangements.
Yeah.
He writes for the band like he plays piano. So he's the piano player in our faculty jazz group. And and our dean for our college is a theater person, so she's an arts person. So, and our president, the university president, it supports us. So when we have things that we need to do, it's not a problem as long as we go through the proper channels with the paperwork and the leave and all of that stuff. It's fine. But so it's really not difficult. In fact, they encourage us to do those kind of things.
Right.
Wow.
And Roxanne, I know you must be playing for at least 3 additional churches.
Yeah. So, all right. I do a lot of gospel music, and I do keep really busy. And that to me was because I didn't have the practice time, and I was afraid if I'm not busy enough, then I'll look up one day and I won't be able to play my instrument anymore, and I don't want that to happen. So it was a juggle. It was a real juggle. As a matter of fact, that's the reason I left the high school to go to the university. Didn't realize that at a smaller university, you still wear a lot of hats like you did in high school. But yes, I raised 2 girls as a single parent. One has a master's in music, and the other one is working on her master's in music. And I gig, I play. And they talk about it now because band rehearsal started at my house at 10:30 at night. After band rehearsal at Chicago State, we'd come here, and the girls, I would tell them, you have a choice. You can go to grandma's house or you can go to bed. If you can't sleep through the music, then you have to go to grandma's house. And they talk about it now. They said they used to be at the top of the stairs saying, oh man, just be excited about the music. They still talk about that. So I took them everywhere, really. They were on campus. They went to all the recitals. They went to all the programs. They learned to listen. They learned to sit through rehearsals. And sometimes they even went on gigs. When I was touring with one of the TV shows here. And last minute, he wanted me to go like Thanksgiving. And I said, hey, I need a ticket for my daughter if you want me to come. He bought the ticket. And she sat on Vicki Winans' lap the whole thing. But it was just learning how to make that work. So it's tough. Yeah, it is tough.
And we're at the top of the hour, Tia, but we want to hear from you and definitely want to hear how you navigate the life of being a performer and a full-time educator, and give us a sneak peek about what's coming for conn-selmer Institute Connect.
Oh yeah. Well, for me, I unlike Roxanne, I don't have any children, and so it makes it a little easier up until this pandemic puppy that I just got. So I'm getting a little but it's a constant balancing act. I've kind of made a concession with myself that it's never going to be 50-50. Depending on what's ahead of me is what I'm putting my efforts toward, and then it might be 70% toward writing if an album's coming up, and then I'm teaching, the other 40%. Or if a big show's coming up at Berkeley, I'm putting 90% there, and then I might get to my instrument 10%. And one thing that I've learned is that the two really complete each other, which is a beautiful thing because I don't get overly exhausted. Sometimes you can get kind of toured out, and then other times you can get exhausted teaching. And the power has been being on the road, getting right off the road, and then going to the classroom and sitting and having really honest conversations with my students about, listen, y'all need to get this together, get your plan together, but you have to have your business together. The flight was delayed. We missed sound check, so and so, So the business aspect and artistic development aspect, and then vice versa. But yeah, it's constantly, it's challenging because not only are we musicians, but if you have your own band or with other bands, then you're dealing with logistics and you have a manager, booking agent, or if you're doing it yourself, there's certain tiers of being a musician that again is going to pour back into education, but it's constantly doing this.
Yeah.
It hasn't been like this since I was at Spelman, practicing. It's always like, okay, what am I willing to sacrifice to gain on this other side, and then shifting it. So it's a blessing, though. It's really a blessing.
Yes, and Tia, we have our HBCU National Band Directors Consortium. We have two important events coming up, and Roxanne is involved. I want the two of you to keep talking because we have the jam session coming up at the Midwest Band Clinic in December, and then we're going to pray that we're going to be able to do our convention in March of 2022, in-person convention where we have our all-star jazz ensemble, and love to have you and the two of you and Stephanie Sanders. Hey, we're gonna make it a real deal.
Doc, I don't think she probably doesn't know yet that she's the guest artist. But I have something for you, Tia. It's a little different in this day and age, but when I was working with Bernie Mac, I would have like my weekend hairdo that I would not wear to work on Monday. So do you juggle, this is how you look on the weekend,
that's right.
how you look on Monday.
And church.
That's right.
And
church.
Yeah.
This is my church garb.
Yeah. I had to get a whole new wardrobe when I got to Berkeley because it just wasn't working. My show clothes weren't working in classroom. The sequins and stuff, they were just like, the hair,
Hopefully we can work that out, that you can join.
Yes, definitely. I look forward to it.
Okay.
We're going to work it out, and we appreciate all of you joining us tonight. This is for our inaugural webinar with the HBCU Collective. We'll come together again next month on June 30th, as we'll have Dr. Chrissy Walker and Professor Taylor Whitehead of North Carolina A&T and Virginia State University, respectively, as we talk about the HBCU experience.
That's Virginia State College, isn't it? Whitehead.
Yes, that's correct. Virginia State, that's correct.
Yeah.
And Dr. Walker's at North Carolina A&T, and we'll talk about the HBCU experience, and we'll talk about that from the alumni standpoint, cultivating healthy alumni relationships with our band programs, because this is the HBCU Collective, and we want to talk to everybody and bring everybody to the table to talk about how we can move things forward in our HBCU band programs. Professor Robert Griffin, Tia Fuller, and Professor Roxanne Stevenson, thank you for coming. Tia, go ahead and take us out with your last comment.
Oh, I just wanted to put a shameless plug that I'm so excited to be here because I've been in conversation, and we're going to launch an exchange program between Berkeley College of Music and Spelman College, which is then that's going to be in fall of 2022. But essentially my big picture is that it's going to be partnership between the AUC and Berkeley, so that a lot of the young women and men of color at Berkeley can have that Black college experience, and then vice versa. So this is great, and I'm happy to be on this panel and be a part of this conversation, this ongoing conversation.
It's ongoing, right? We only scratched the surface, and we probably have to come back for a part 2. So don't be surprised if you get an email from me.
Okay.
the chat is going to be on for a little while. We thank our CEO, Steve Zapp. We appreciate you opening up the doors for the HBCUs to come in. Our Vice President of Education, conn-selmer, Dr. Tim Lawson-Heiser, and our Managing Director of Education, of the Division of Education, Mr. Mike Campice. We appreciate all of you, as well as our CSI team, Aaron Cole and Elisa Jansen-Jones, and Rania and Beth. Oh my goodness, y'all have been awesome in the back, making sure that all this works. They have put all the links in the chat for you folks. Make sure that you go on, make sure you get everything you need from the chat. It will stay on as we cut our cameras off and bid you adieu. We're going to wave good night, folks, and thank you for hanging with the HBCU Collective.
Great. Outstanding.